Diane Keaton's early development as an actor shaped the foundation for everything she later became known for in film. Born in Los Angeles in 1946, she pursued acting in New York at a time when the stage was a proving ground for seriousness, discipline, and voice. She studied performance not as a vehicle for glamour, but as a practice defined by timing, delivery, and control of presence. Her earliest work was on stage, where she learned to let hesitation speak, to use silence as part of the line, and to communicate character through posture and pacing. These habits would later become recognizable signatures in her film performances. Keaton did not aim to portray characters as perfected versions of themselves. Instead, she leaned toward the ordinary, the unpolished, and the emotionally accessible. She was interested in speech patterns that sounded lived-in rather than theatrical. The convergence between Keaton and Woody Allen began in the world of theater before it became a central influence on American film. Keaton's casting in Allen's Broadway production of Play It Again. Sam placed her inside a working environment where humor came from conversational rhythm rather than punchline structure. It was a style that aligned closely with her natural instincts. Keaton approached comedic material through emotional sincerity rather than exaggeration, while Allen's writing depended on specific pacing and structural consistency. The combination created a dynamic in which scripted rhythm met intuitive modulation. Keaton did not treat lines as fixed endpoints. She treated them as points of emotional contact, allowing slight pauses, overlaps, and conversational imperfections to create realism. This approach introduced a kind of looseness into Allen's writing that had not been present before. As their professional collaboration moved from stage to screen, this effect became more pronounced. Their early films together established a template for character-based comedy in which dialogue drove emotional progression. The turning point came with Annie Hall in 1977. The film is often credited with reshaping how romantic relationships were portrayed in American cinema, but its influence rests largely on the character that Keaton shaped. Annie was not written as an idealized romantic lead. She was thoughtful, uncertain, spontaneous, humorous, and complex. Keaton's performance made these elements feel natural. The character's individuality did not rely on narrative instruction. It emerged through the way she spoke, the rhythm she chose, and the physicality of her presence. Keaton contributed significantly to the construction of Annie Hall's identity. The wardrobe that became iconic, loose ties, vests, wide trousers, was drawn from Keaton's personal clothing rather than a pre-designed costuming plan. This was not a superficial choice. Wardrobe helped Keaton express how Annie moved, how she thought, and how she interacted with the world. It formed part of the character's inner logic. Keaton's instinct was that authenticity in performance could be strengthened by grounding the character in something lived rather than imagined. Audiences responded because Annie Hall felt like a person rather than a role. The emotional realism of the performance came from subtle behaviors, how she held eye contact, when she broke it, how long she allowed a silence to linger before speaking. These decisions were craft-based, not improvisational whim. Woody Allen's writing style during this period emphasized narrative structure and recurring motifs. His scripts relied on thematic continuity and repeated emotional cues. Keaton's presence expanded the texture of those elements. Her timing created elasticity within structured scenes. A written pause became a moment of reflection. A line break became an opportunity for humor rooted in vulnerability. The dynamic between writer and performer became a form of equilibrium. The script provided shape. Keaton provided breathing room. Their collaboration showed how comedic performance could draw power from understatement and sincerity rather than exaggeration or speed. This shift influenced the trajectory of romantic comedy in American film and reshaped audience expectations around how relationships could be portrayed. The success of Annie Hall positioned Keaton as a major force in film, not simply as a performer associated with a specific director. She demonstrated that humor and emotional authenticity could coexist without diminishing each other. Following this, she took on roles that reinforced her range rather than her association. She moved into dramas and ensemble pieces while maintaining the qualities that defined her earlier work. She approached each project with the same emphasis on character-centered storytelling, refusing to flatten her performances into single emotional notes. This consistency across different genres demonstrated that her voice as an actor was self-directed, not derived from anyone else's authorship. As years passed and perspectives widened, Keaton reflected publicly on her professional relationship with Woody Allen in terms that remained consistent. She spoke about the work, The collaboration that allowed her to develop a distinct screen presence, the trust that permitted creative risk, and the clarity she gained about how she wanted to shape her characters. Her remarks did not revolve around personal narratives or external interpretations. Instead, she emphasized craft, writing, timing, rehearsal, performance, and the responsibility each actor holds to the truth of a character. What becomes clear in her later reflections is that the work she did during those years contributed to her sense of artistic identity. She credits the collaboration for giving her space to understand her voice on screen. At the same time, her career demonstrates that she carried that voice forward independently. The truth she expresses is one of professional definition, not attachment. The work mattered because it helped her articulate who she was as an actor, and she continued that articulation long after the collaboration became one chapter of a much longer career. After the success of Annie Hall, Diane Keaton entered a period where her public identity could easily have been defined by her association with Woody Allen. However, her next career decisions demonstrated a determined separation between her professional voice and the expectations that came with that partnership. Keaton chose roles that shifted the context in which audiences understood her. She accepted dramatic parts requiring emotional weight rather than comedic looseness, showing that her skill set was wider than the roles that first made her recognizable. This shift reinforced a key truth about her craft. She did not rely on a single narrative persona to sustain her work. Her role in the Godfather series, particularly as Kay Adams Corleone, had already established a capacity for dramatic subtlety. But it was in the years following Annie Hall that her dramatic presence developed into something more defined. In films like Looking for Mr. Goodbar, 1977, and Reds, 1981, Keaton demonstrated a willingness to explore characters with internal conflict, moral complexity, and psychological depth. These roles showed that she could convey emotional experience without leaning on the mannerisms and timing that characterized her more comedic work. Reds, directed by Warren Beatty, earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress, further confirming that her range extended far beyond her collaborations with Allen. The consistency across her performances was not stylistic repetition, but methodical awareness. Keaton understood how to hold emotional tension in silence and how to release it with minimal gesture. She allowed internal thought to be visible without external explanation. This quality gave her performances a reflective tone, enabling characters to feel lived in rather than theatrical. The resonance of her work came from the way she allowed audiences to recognize themselves in the characters she portrayed. She portrayed individuals negotiating uncertainty, indecision, desire, and self-doubt, qualities that are universal but often flattened in mainstream film representation. As her career progressed, Keaton continued to refine her approach to character identity. She did not adopt a new professional persona with each film. Instead, she carried her foundational qualities, curiosity, restraint, and observational sensitivity, into different narrative situations. Her performances in Baby Boom, 1987, Father of the Bride, 1991, and Something's Got to Give, 2003, showed that she could anchor comedic and dramatic arcs of characters at different life stages. She did not adjust her craft to follow trends. Instead, she allowed her roles to evolve as she aged, portraying characters whose experiences mirrored the passage of time. This approach made her one of the few actresses in American film to maintain leading roles across multiple decades. The continuity came not from branding but from authenticity. Keaton's screen presence remained tied to emotional accessibility. She did not portray characters striving for idealized versions of themselves. She portrayed people navigating the experiences and contradictions of ordinary life. The durability of her career reflects the trust she built with audiences. Viewers did not need each character to be the same. They trusted the sincerity behind her portrayals. Keaton's reflections on her collaboration with Woody Allen remain consistent throughout her later career. When asked about that period, she described it in terms of professional development rather than personal definition. She acknowledged that working with Allen allowed her to understand how to use her instinct in service of narrative tone. She credited the collaboration with providing her the space to experiment with timing, language, and presence. However, she also made clear through her work that her identity as an actor was not tied to any individual creative partnership. Her filmography shows a deliberate and continuous effort to engage with different directors, different styles of film, and different emotional demands. The truth Keaton expresses about this collaboration is not framed as revelation but as perspective. For her, the significance lay in how the work shaped her understanding of character authenticity. The films they made together taught her how to trust unpolished delivery, how to use hesitation as a communicative element, and how to let conversation carry emotional narrative instead of relying on structured dramatic cues. These lessons became the foundation of her performance identity, and she carried them forward independently. Keaton's later interviews consistently returned to the same central point. She values her work for what it allowed her to learn, and for what it demonstrated about the possibilities of character-centered storytelling. She does not position herself as an interpreter of Woody Allen's intentions or how the film should be judged historically. Instead, she focuses on the craft, how the collaboration helped her define her method and how she continued that method beyond the partnership. By the time she reached her later career, Keaton had developed a clear understanding of the creative principles that guided her. She chose roles that preserved emotional honesty, avoided artificial sentiment, and allowed for nuance. She moved through film history without discarding her early influences, but also without being bound by them. Her career stands as evidence that longevity in film is sustained not through reinvention but through clarity of voice, clarity of character intention, and clarity of emotional commitment. The professional truth Diane Keaton shares about Woody Allen is therefore rooted in work, not narrative speculation. She acknowledges a collaboration as a significant chapter, but not as a defining one. The lasting impact of that period is a development of a performance language that she refined, expanded, and carried forward on her own terms. As Diane Keaton entered the later stage of her career, her public reflections became more measured, concise, and selective. She did not revisit her past in order to revise it, nor did she attempt to reshape public interpretation of the film she made. Instead, her focus remained on articulating what the work taught her and what principles she carried forward. When she speaks about Woody Allen, she approaches the subject from a professional angle, emphasizing the shared artistic environment rather than the personal narratives that others may project onto their history. Keaton has consistently described herself as someone whose understanding of character came into clarity during the years she worked alongside Allen. In her view, the collaboration allowed her to discover how to use understatement as a dramatic tool, how to let awkwardness become expressive rather than corrective, and how to trust conversational realism as a legitimate means of emotional communication. These insights shaped her approach long after the collaboration receded into the background of her filmography. The lessons she draws are structural rather than nostalgic. She speaks about rhythm, pacing, text interpretation, and emotional calibration. The collaboration is referenced as a formative environment, not as a defining relationship. Her reflections show a clear boundary. She does not attempt to control how others interpret Allen's legacy or their professional history together. She does not instruct the audience on how to think. Instead, she limits her perspective to what she can speak to responsibly, her own experience, her own process, and the craft she developed. This choice maintains her integrity as a performer who values precision of language and emotional accuracy. It also reflects a lifelong tendency to avoid public performance of personal narrative. Keaton has never positioned herself as a commentator on her own mythology. She remains grounded in the work itself. As Keaton aged, her career continued to reflect the sensibilities she refined earlier. She chose roles that acknowledged time rather than resisted it. She portrayed characters who experienced aging not as decline but as an extension of identity. Something's Got to Give, 2003, is one example of how she allowed life stage to become narrative strength rather than limitation. The film presented a character whose emotional experiences were not framed as nostalgic or retrospective, but active and ongoing. Keaton's performance demonstrated that emotional complexity does not diminish with age. Her later films similarly showed that maturity offers new forms of vulnerability, humor, and perspective. This approach set her apart in an industry that has historically minimized women's visibility as they age. Keaton did not attempt to replicate earlier versions of her screen presence. She allowed the shape of her characters to expand and evolve. The continuity across her roles comes from the authenticity of her emotional approach rather than from any repeated stylistic markers. Her characters maintained agency, choice, uncertainty, humor, and introspection, qualities that she has emphasized throughout her career. In interviews, Keaton has consistently framed her reflections on Woody Allen in terms of gratitude for the artistic space the collaboration provided. She acknowledges that the work they created together contributed to her understanding of performance and helped her establish a screen presence built on sincerity and individuality. However, the way she describes her career makes clear that she does not view that collaboration as the sole foundation of her identity. Instead, it represents an influential chapter among many. Her continued range of roles across decades demonstrates that her voice does not belong to another artist's authorship. It is self-directed. When asked about her legacy, Keaton emphasizes the importance of remaining open to learning and aware of one's own creative instincts. She suggests that the most meaningful elements of performance are not the lines delivered or the gestures made, but the honesty of the internal experience behind them. This perspective aligns with the approach she has taken throughout her life. Character truth emerges when the actor trusts the moment rather than tries to control it. The success she achieved, both within and beyond a collaboration with Allen, reflects this principle. The truth Diane Keaton shares about Woody Allen is grounded in professional respect and artistic influence. She acknowledges that the collaboration shaped her craft and allowed her to develop the quiet precision and naturalism that characterize her work. She recognizes that the films they made together played a significant role in her emergence as a major figure in American cinema. However, she also demonstrates, through her choices, her career longevity, and her disciplined independence, that her identity as an actor cannot be reduced to that partnership. Her legacy lies in the authenticity she brought to characters across decades, in the quiet strength of emotional presence, and in the belief that vulnerability on screen is not a weakness but a form of clarity. She helped open space for female characters to be intelligent, hesitant, uncertain, expressive, and real. She demonstrated that humor can come from truth rather than performance. She showed that age can enrich character rather than diminish opportunity. Diane Keaton's truth is not a revelation. It is a record of work shaped by collaboration, strengthened by independence, and sustained by a continued commitment to authenticity. It is a story of an actor who learned early to trust her instincts and spent a lifetime refining them.